Hello, everybody, and thank you for inviting me to give this talk. This talk is for mentees and mentors in the field of STEM. That is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, where we still need additional measures to empower more women in the field. This is my one-page recommendations I give typically to my students and postdocs about the next step for a possible career in academia. I will not read it now in all details. I think this will be a discussion point after my talk. I just want to get one message across, that you are in charge of your career and you do not need to wait. You need to take actions. Okay. I also recommend this book. It helps to have successful role models. And this book gives the conversations with 23 professors from 11 nationalities, working mainly in Switzerland. And they are different type of women, and they are different paths to success. And I hope that this different career path help you to find a role model that actually works for you. Why is the gender topic still an issue? A good summary of the main issues is given by this article. It's a very short article written by a man, published in 2019. And I think it really summarizes the key issues and describes the sexual and gender harassment in academia and why we are losing so many women in this area. This is not to scare you away, because I actually believe when you are more aware about what is going on, it helps you to cope with it. And I'm very happy for every woman who does not need to experience gender harassment. I think this is a sign of progress, but unfortunately, too many studies still show that this is an issue. I will use this picture here during my talk. I really like it. It comes from the V-Shape Tech platform, a movement for greater diversity in tech and innovation. It's actually supported by many young women, and it has the vision for a 50-50 ratio for women and men in the workforce. I really like this picture, and for me, it is about cracking the confidence and the power gap. And I hope throughout this talk, it will become clear what I mean with this. So let me first give you a little bit of background about my career. I did a diploma in physics at ETH Zurich in 1984, which is equivalent to a master. I graduated top of the class because I was motivated to win a fellowship to study abroad, a Fulbright fellowship that allowed me to go to the US. At that time, when I got the diploma certificate, I could choose between Frau and Fräulein. So I chose Frau, and between Physiker and Physikerin, so the male or female version of physicist. I chose the male version because I believed in equal rights and equal opportunity. And for me, the male version meant the profession, and I just wanted to be part of this, even though I was a woman. I was also convinced that all I had to do was to perform well and that I don't need any special help. No special help is needed for women. Today, I changed my mind. I actually think the competition is not fair. There are always a few survivors. I'm actually one of them. Real progress with more women needs more efforts. So with the fellowship, I could manage, and the top grades, of course, I could manage to get into Stanford University, into the US, which was a great experience for me. I think without going to the US, I never would have become a successful professor in physics or in Switzerland again. Stanford had something really useful when I started there. It had a rotation principle for PhD advisor. It was very easy to find out if you're professor and you fit. And luckily at that time, I met the first woman professor in my whole career. She was a visiting woman professor at Stanford, and she actually helped me to find the right professor for me. And I'm still very grateful that this happened. I actually changed the professor and went to another younger professor at that time, and he was a good fit for me. After I did my PhD, I was hired as a member of technical staff with AT&T Bell Labs. That was really the way to go in my field. And because I was part of the American system, I could start my independent research lab right away. I did not do a postdoc. And also I was very well prepared for it because my professor was not micromanaging. Actually, it was rather tough. I had a hard time, but I learned a lot. And in addition, at Bell Labs, they just went through an expensive lawsuit with a former woman scientist. And they started a formal mentor program for women MTS and a women MTS lunch meeting where the women could meet each other and exchange their experience. And I have to say, both of this has been very helpful for me at Bell Labs. And I'm very thankful for the women who were fighting for their rights, even though, of course, at the end, she had to leave Bell Labs going through this lawsuit, which is a very sad situation, and I will come back to this again. I was always guided and rewarded for performance, and I was able to turn the anger based on perceived injustice into more work to show them that I can do it. Initially, my job advisement at Bell Labs was to do something else than anybody else, but it better be good. So that was a clear definition that how I will be evaluated. It was scary, at the same time, really inspiring. Initially, I was thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do? But because I looked for it, I found it, and I invented the season. When you look at my background, I had a very interdisciplinary approach with the combination of solid-state lasers, semiconductor physics, and microwave measurement techniques. It really helped me that my PhD advisor was actually in engineering, and I was educated in physics. That gave me a lot of really useful tools. And at Bell Labs, I had access to state-of-the-art material. The combination of it all made it happen for me to do this invention. In 1991, there was actually a Frauenstreik, a national Frauenstreik, a women demonstration. For example, this one picture here, wir wollen jetzt eine Frau. So these are students at ETH who's never seen a woman professor like me when I studied. And they even wrote a letter to the president of ETH. And this all had an effect that actually I was recruited to become a professor at ETH. I was contacted in 1992 because of the political pressure to hire more women at ETH Zurich. And I was appointed with a direct appointment. So this is, to a certain extent, actually I was actually a quota woman. I was hired into a woman position. I was a little bit concerned at that time, but Anthony Johnson, who was also an MTS at Bell Labs, encouraged me to take it. And I'm really glad for his advice. And I give this advice now to all women, because I'm really glad I took this position. I consider being a professor a dream job for somebody who likes research. And there is obviously competition for such a dream job. This shows you the number of professors over the years. And, you know, ETH got founded 1855. And for most of the time, it was an all-male professor culture. And only here in the late 80s, the first women. I'm actually the first woman who was in architecture. And because of the 1991 woman demo, the first larger number of women were hired, me included. Today, we are still actually a small number of tenured professors, well below 30%, which is an issue, which I will explain later. We have a higher number of female assistant professors, but be aware that not all of them are tenure track. So they only have actually a time window of 6 years to actually find another job somewhere else. There was no space at ETH to take them over. So now there is this political pressure to increase the women in science, which I think is required and justified. And the increasing number of excellent women actually question many established privileges for our male colleagues. We have a male-dominated management culture, and the informal male networks affect current working culture, not in a positive way. Women very often are not welcome. Maybe they are tolerated with limited resources and power. So this is my sign about, the power gap that we need to crack. In 1999, there was the MIT report, which had really a major impact on my life. A group of senior women at MIT got organized and reported discrimination in resource distribution and culture to the president. The MIT president at that time reacted well to this request and started a more detailed survey. And the result of this survey was actually published out, and the president acknowledged gender discrimination and announced additional measures. And that really changed the culture at MIT. I will come back to it, and it allowed to hire more women. For example, the president at that time wrote in the introduction, "However, I sat bolt upright in my chair when a senior woman who has felt unfairly treated for some time said, 'I also felt very positive when I was young.'" So when that report was published, it really helped me to stay in academia. I had a hard time after I just had my 2 children in 1997 and 1998. And I realized through this report that I was not alone, and that it is not my fault that I don't feel welcome in my department. And that gave me the strength that I just kept going. And I wanted to show my colleagues that I can do it. And the hope was that with more performance, that my colleagues will ultimately treat me with more respect. Ultimately, in my career, I stepped up into leadership, and that was 2010. I took the director position of NCCR MAST, which is a 12-year program, and one of the job and goal requirement as a director of such a network was to do something for the advancement of women. I had resources in the management, and I hired a person, Dr. Anna Gary, who helped me to really do something for the advancement of women. We also started a communication, actually a reflection on diversity with the OSA magazine. And this was together with Professor Anthony Johnson. Remember, that's the one who recommended that I take the woman job. At this point in my career, I have earned the respect of my colleagues. I have put in the work to establish a long career. If I, as a senior female science professor, cannot speak up strongly for change, who can? So now today, I'm in it for more than 10 years. Motivated by the MIT report, I also organized the women at ETH. And it really took this additional full-time person to make it possible for me, because we women were pretty much alone. We had to develop some trust, even get organized and join up. And by 2013, we had a women professor forum, and 75% of all women professors were a member. The most efficient thing that we could do with our network was actually do a survey. This was not my idea, actually, but this is now what I really recommend to all organizations and all women: get networked and make a survey. We can even give you the questions that we ask. It's all on the web. And followed by this survey that we published from the Women Professor Forum, ETH and EPFL followed with some survey on their own. And the outcome was sobering. Actually, I did not realize how bad the situation was before this survey by my female professors. So at least 23% female professors, for example, at ETH, felt discriminated within the previous 2 years. The male-dominated management culture and the predominance of men in numbers in the leadership position affected women in a not positive way. And not sufficient accountability and transparency with regards to resources and space allocation, committee work, teaching load, and most importantly, the decision-making process was considered a serious issue. The grievance processes were considered generally both by men and women not good enough. So if you feel discriminated, you couldn't really get help, because women in particular rated the complaint process for discrimination as a rather negative to very negative. And the duration of the grievance process is a source of undue stress. And if you even have to take a lawyer, the financial burden is incredible. Whereas the other side basically is supported by our tax money. So this power mismatch gives, unfortunately, some signs of additional academic mobbing. And then there is a conflict of interest for the professors involved in the process, because very often retired male professors were part of this grievance process with all their networks, informal networks. So this didn't help. And there is a lack of protection of professors from frivolous accusations. And this is actually still ongoing. I mean, you know, certain accusation and processes became weaponized. And I will give you examples. So the surveys have been published. They're available online. You will get a copy of my talk, so you can get it. Actually, the APFL report gives some more details of the issues. The public report is a little bit whitewashed. There is actually an internal report, which is unfortunately confidential, because there is a lot of learning material that would help the broader community to better understand the issues. Because I always experience that the people say, you know, what's the problem with the women? They just need to toughen up and work a little bit harder to be successful. Unfortunately, here in Switzerland and Germany and many other countries in Europe, the leadership efforts are focused on keeping us actually quiet. They are more concerned about the potential reputational damage rather than fixing the problem. So what are the challenges and barriers to progress? So let me start with the first one, the competition with careers outside STEM fields. So when you look at the incoming number of students into academia, okay, and look how many ultimately became professors, it's only a very small number. Most actually go outside from the science, even though they are trained in the science. And a rather small number goes into non-university research in industry and government, even though there is actually a high number of people needed here. People always say there aren't enough people in the tech field and in science. Okay, so what about the women here? So there is a 2017 Forbes report that said that women leave the tech field at a rate that is 45% higher than men. Why? Women are opting out of their careers because they are rejecting the workplace. So ultimately, they're opting out of science in total and end up outside science, even though we educate them in science, even though they were highly motivated to be in science, it is not primarily a pipeline problem. It exists even in fields where women are well represented and have been for decades. It is about power and privileges. We need equal access and not just for special groups. And if you want to be just a little bit rational, if you look at how many make it to professor, if you want to optimize your chance, if you can cut out 50% of your competition by making a hostile environment for women, your chance of becoming a professor is higher. Very simple. But it's a lost opportunity for us all. It's not good for us as a society and for the investment that we put in educating our people. The next point, implicit and explicit bias in hiring and retention. So this is a very important graph. Let me spend a little bit of time in this one. This was a study done by the Swiss National Science Foundation about 40,000 reviewers in project funding from 2009 to 2015. This shows that peer review is not gender blind. It shows you here the mean scores given by the reviewer for a proposal. And these are gender of the reviewer here, the woman and the man. And red are the proposals from the women, and here the proposal from the men. So what you can see is the men proposal were scored higher than the female proposal, but not only by the men, but also by the women. So this means that clearly shows that the women have the same bias against the women. The only benefit is the gap between the ranking is a little bit smaller with the women than with the men. But just putting more women into peer review doesn't really solve the problem of the gender bias. Okay, this is very important. And if the acceptance rate is really low, this difference in the score makes a proposal to be accepted or not. So solutions to such problems is that, first of all, this gender data needs to be taken. Then we will have to define evaluation criteria well defined so that people actually rank a proposal based on equal excellence criteria. And we need to reduce conflict of interest in peer review. We need to also correct the scores for the potential bias. So before we give the proposal, we just move up the scores so that we don't punish female proposals by this bias. And limit the number of funded grants per PI so that the acceptance rate can be significantly higher. This is actually done at SNF and the ERC grants. So what is the current status in the physics department at ETH? Let me did a higher statistics in my department. As I said, actually in 1991, there was the national woman demonstration, which increased the pressure. Then 2 women professors were hired into the physics department. And then for 22 years, all professor selection committee resulted in hiring a male professor. It's 24-0. On the level of the permanent senior scientist, the ratio was 33-1. We only got 1 additional woman hired into a tenure professor position with a dual career appointment. Dual career, what does this mean? That this means the physics department wanted to hire a man, and the man said, I need also a position for my wife. This is, of course, a very hard starting position. Very often these women are even less wanted than the one that have been hired. 2017, Professor Simon Lilly actually stepped up for the first time to become the department head. In physics, he is the husband of the dual career hire, Marcella Carollo. So he was more aware of the issues. And he initiated an emergency program, which was, of course, supported by myself, his wife, to hire more women tenure-track faculty. 2019, we had a crisis in the physics department. Actually, Professor Carolla was terminated. And this case was very controversially discussed in the media. And it's currently at the Swiss Federal Administrative Court. But this crisis then got an agreement of the physics department that they really need to hire more women. Within 2 years, 5 tenure-track women assistant professors were hired, even more without tenure-track. And actually, again, this progress was based on another woman being heard. Like in my case, that my working culture at Bell Labs got improved because another woman had to file for sexual harassment. So this is, of course, a very sad situation. When you look at other schools like MIT or universities like MIT, when you look at other universities like MIT or Imperial College, you can see that significant progress with the number of women faculty was only achieved with affirmative action hiring. Affirmative action hiring is like a quota woman, right? So because it was directly hiring women, making a special effort. So MIT did that 1971, 1996, and 2006. And you can see only through these additional measures, the number of women was significantly increased. And you can see when no additional measures were taken, it remained constant, and only with additional measures, it got up. So it doesn't just happen for nothing, right? It has been proven over and over again. If we want to get significant change, we need additional measures. Here, the second time for the additional measures, this was also initiated by a committee of women faculty in the School of Science. They actually got together 16 out of 17 women professors, and they got the MIT report going. And in this MIT report, one woman said, the feeling of an injustice, the anger that accumulates from this recognition, and the strong desire for change for themselves and future generation was the motivation to do it all. For me, this resonates, right? I feel exactly the same way like these women. And I regret that currently our leadership is not reacting as positively as the president at MIT in 1999. Well, let me talk about the hostile and unwelcoming working culture, which I think is one of the core problems currently. So I really like this picture, you know, which shows how the men in Anne's lab see her, right? Because, you know, there are all these stereotypes. Most of my male colleagues never worked with a woman, as you could see from the statistics. The typical role of a woman in their life was their mothers, their maid. And this doesn't mean a maid, even though a maid is also normally a woman role, the daughter, and this intellectual spinster that maybe does sometimes a career, but gives up everything else, including being actually a real woman. Being a female colleague is very hard, to be really recognized equally with equal ambition and equal resources and equal power. Actually, it's well documented by many, many books that when a woman excels at her job, both male and female co-workers will remark that she may be accomplishing a lot, but is not as well liked by her peers. She's probably also too aggressive, not a team player, a bit political, can't be trusted or difficult. So in a hostile working culture, this gender bias can result in character assassination, right? This woman is from a character point of view, not considered good. And so when there is a problem, these women do not get the normal benefit of doubt. And that had some real bad consequences. So these are 3 public examples of women who achieved it all. They all got into a tenured professor position, were very successful. Professor Heike Egner in Austria, Professor Tanja Singer in Germany, and also director from a Max Planck Institute, and Professor Marcella Carollo, my former colleague in the physics department. All of these women were terminated in their jobs, and the accusation was based on significant misconduct in management and inappropriate leadership. The accusers remained anonymous, and the allegations were aimed at their personal integrity. The German politician said in this article here, this is a career risk, especially for women, this character. Mission Rufmord, because they didn't get the benefit of doubt. And the grievance processes did not work out. This we have to stop, because in most of these cases, young women were used against these senior women, which is really sad. So what are the examples of a bad working culture for women? Women and other outsider groups often have lower mistake tolerance and are punished more strongly for them. The lack of independent grievance procedures make it very difficult, because minor mistakes or even made up issues can become weaponized, totally blown up out of proportion. I've seen some of my male colleagues do much worse, and suddenly it becomes a big issue for a woman. And this supports a management culture of intimidation. Unequal treatment, depending on how many friends one has in leadership, does not really support excellence and waste resources. And of course, these informal male networks give them access to many more friends, right? I really like the quote from Albert Einstein: a person who never made a mistake never tried anything new. And it would be nice if this also applies for women scientists, right? In addition, the gender bias, with the stereotype. So the woman stereotype to be pleasant, caring, and modest, and the man stereotype to be decisive, competitive, and forceful, pushes women also into more service work in science, more peer review, more work-intensive committees, etc. And, some people think, one way of solving the problem, just put women into reviewing committees. But that alone will not solve the problem, as I showed you with the gender bias in peer review from the National Science Foundation. It is important for the women to set clear priorities and to learn to say no. The time is limited, and you need some time for your fun activities, for your family. More experienced women can give good advice what committee to join, because what we observed is that the women tend to be pushed in the work-intensive committee, and the men get pushed into the power committee, where you distribute money. So more transparency within the departments for committee work and teaching load would really help here to distribute the load, the workload, more equally to everybody. Also, I really like this quote from our Bundesrätin Simonetta Sommaruga. She is in the Swiss Federal Council. Die Macht der Männer ist, Frauen zu spalten. Und das muss man als Frau durchschauen. So in English, the power of men is to divide the women, and you have to see through that as a woman. This is an important message, and you need to understand that. Women really need to realize and understand it. At the end, it's about power, resources, privileges for a special group. They will not give it up just without any pressure. More excellent women are here. So I think we have a chance, when we learn to help each other, to change the working culture. Additional the traditional power games is secure power by dividing. This is well documented. And with regards to women, this means, we play career women versus housewife, young women versus senior women, where senior women are expected in their management to be more caring. Actually, I like one quote of one of my colleagues who said, "I'm your professor, not your mother." Quota of women is becoming a bad word. Yes versus no. At the end, we all want the same. And, there is a tendency to co-opt a few women to play ball. And all question in principle women's ability to fit in and deliver. And the focus is always to fix the women so that they actually can become successful. I really recommend this book. It's not you, it's the workplace. And it goes back to the study, the result from this Forbes report, where we lose too many women because of a bad working culture. There is basically no evidence that women have more frequent conflicts in working with other women. That's also a myth that is being propagated by our male colleagues, repeated by women. Women actually spend more time supporting, counseling, and advocating for women than men do. Unfortunately, when women actively promote other women, they often face career penalties. One woman said in one of the things, "I became the lightning rod of male disgruntlement when I started to push for hiring more women." Not even my white male executives receive any career-related advantage for actually working to create diversity. Many highly educated and talented women are opting out of their careers because they are rejecting the workplace, And that is not what we want, right? And I think we can cope and help to improve this culture when we cultivate women-only networks, and it will make you feel more welcome and also get more emotional support. On page 62 in this book, it actually summarizes what are the options when women face bad working culture. They have the option to leave, which we don't want, because we have these motivated women who we convinced to go into this field. We don't want to lose them again just because we cannot manage to get a good working culture. That they accept second-class status. That doesn't make them very happy role models. Try to get ahead by becoming one of the boys. That's a very slippery road and doesn't make you feel very good. And I would really push and convince you all that by building sisterhood and seeking systemic changes together, we can do it. We can really do it. We have now enough women out there in many key positions, but we need to join our efforts and do something. I have a dream, that a group of 10 top performing women professors are walking into the office of my president and say, we want to have a change in culture. And we would like to put a very specific woman that we know who is going to do a difference in charge of the program. Be aware, sisterhood is not the same thing as friendship. Sisterhood is women supporting, mentoring, and advocating for other women. Sisterhood is an ethical, political, social, economic relationship, and it can connect women in all fields, in all disciplines. And it doesn't need to be a personal one. We don't need to agree on all the details, how we, if we call it quota or, some kind of additional measure. This is all details in the details and can be adopted as needed. It's about the goal to make a working place that actually is good, like for our male colleagues. So you can reach out and give back already as a student. We started in the physics department a peer mentoring program. And this was really initiated with the help again from the NCCR MAST, with this one person I could hire. I asked her to get a peer mentoring network going, and she did a really good job, because the first thing to convince my male colleagues was actually also to improve the learning environment. But first you have to convince them that maybe this is really needed. And so she first started a confidential interview with open-ended questions, because you need to get the interview so that you get the truth. And she did it with both men and women, different years and background. The learning atmosphere was actually very challenging for all, coming from the gymnasium and entering the university. I really think it needs a transition. We're losing people that we actually shouldn't lose in this transition. But there were some real differences with regards to gender. And basically, we started off with a new peer mentoring program first for women only. And actually, the positive experience we had and feedback we got is now that we are also going to do this for men. We also introduced, interestingly enough, anonymous grading systems. So there is no name anymore on the exam sheets, only numbers, with the bias, right? Remember. We also, with the help of the NCCR MAST, started a Women Professor Forum at ETH Zurich and EPFL. As of today, we still have a high number of memberships, and we want to work together to improve the culture at ETH, which is considered not to be good currently. So let me address the next point, family and care commitments. My message to you all, yes, you can do it. You can have a career and you can have a family. This is a picture from my family with my husband and my two boys. My husband and I, we both worked full time. We did not want that any of us will give up their careers, their dreams. Our kids were full time in daycare. We need special measures to make this happen. Having children is not business as usual. You cannot say, okay, you have kids and you think you can keep going as normal. First of all, what is really important when you have kids, you're not alone. You need to get both parents engaged. You need a reliable daycare, and you need additional support in case of sickness or important working deadlines. Because, when you have to submit a proposal, you have to submit it. The deadline is fixed. And you need to focus on essential tasks and receive additional help. The time is limited. Focus of what is really important for your work. So we started, for example, in the physics department, a special postdoc program. The ERC starting grant basically is only possible within 7 years after the PhD, but with each kid, you get 1 more year, which is really good. For a professor, we actually recommended from the Women Professor Forum that there is no teaching for 1 year around the birth of the child. And actually being a professor, you can work pretty flexibly in terms of the working hours, which is really an advantage. So you can keep working 100% even with small kids because of this job flexibility. Now, let me give you an idea about postdoc mothers, because we are losing a lot of women when they have kids and are in the middle of this career. And very often when a group has a female postdoc who becomes pregnant, these postdocs are convinced to stop or take a break in their work because they are not really working 150% anymore when they have small little kids. So we basically pay now in the physics department to this postdoc mother and their professor, an additional PhD student to work on the same project so that this postdoc mother keeps working on the hot project and is still employed 100%, even though she's probably not working 150% anymore. And together with a PhD student, this you can consider practically a win-win solution, okay? So here we are addressing exactly the problem that this is not business as usual. And the women need to focus and reduce from 150 to 100% work so that they can actually pass this baby phase. So we need additional measures and political pressure for change in the following situations. If the community is small, less than 30%, and there are weak institutional support system for women and minority faculty. When we have a hostile culture and climate for women, we need to fix the institution rather than the women. And of course, we need to change the culture, and we need to get a new free position so that we can get more women into the position. So lagging retirement, of course, delays this process. Some really basic and important messages given here. Under the current existing university culture, we need independent checks, independent grievance procedures with sufficient oversight, and ultimately the credibility that the people really, the leadership is really gonna make a change. Otherwise, it's just on paper and it's not really happening. We need to increase the number of women because it is shown in studies that you need to target at least 30% so that the women can start to influence the working culture. We need more efforts on retention, performance, promotion, and culture change. And the additional efforts to achieve a real culture change, we need to set up structural and real benefit rather than negative feedback for engaging on these issues for both men and women. We need to increase the motivation of our male colleagues with access to more funding, with better governance. Better governance should weaken these informal networks because such networks, when unchecked, tend to hurt overall excellence, waste resources, and hurt the science community in general. For the benefit of us all and good science, we need more male colleagues to kick in. And by knowing that they are not being punished by helping us, we could really make a change. We need their help. We are not enough women currently. When we try harder, we can do better. So look at the example in my department for 22 years, 24 to 0. Within 2 years, 5 tenure track women assistant professor. Let's make this progress continuously and for a long term and without actually terminating a woman professor first. It requires clear commitment from our leadership with measurable results. And with this, I would like to conclude. Thank you very much. I have at the end of this talk some additional references and some additional readings, which I can recommend to both mentees and mentors. Thank you very much.